Hi there, and welcome once again to the 2013 film vlog, and we're now up to episode 11, which given we're only on the 3rd of March, I think we're doing quite well. I think if we carry on films at this rate, we're going to see well over 50 this year, so that's an excellent start. So, on to today's musings on Laura, which is a German film with an Australian director, which is a bit of a strange combination, but let's go with it. And it's set in the spring of 1945, just after Hitler has killed himself and Admiral Dönitz has taken over. And I think one of the things you have to say right from the off is that if you're like me, of a certain generation, you are going into any film like this really thinking, is there anything at all original left to say about the Nazis, the Holocaust, World War II? Because for most school children, certainly of my generation, that's all we get ever taught in history at school, is all this stuff. And everything, all major history programs seem to be devoted to the Nazis and World War II. And you're thinking, really, is there anything left to say? I mean, you've got a few films, like a few years ago, that we had, I think Sarah's Key, which was a slightly different take on the whole thing, which is about genocide of Jews in France. But ultimately, you don't really think there's a lot left to say. But then comes along a film like this, which is, it's a really, really different little piece. It's certainly a different angle to what you would normally see. The film itself tells the story of Hannelore, or Lore, who is the Aryan daughter of a high-ranking SS official and his wife, and she has various siblings as well. And the film opens with Laura sitting in the bath combing her hair, and she looks out the window and sees her father has come home. So she goes downstairs and she goes to see him, and he makes it very, very clear that she has to now get her siblings out of bed because they have to leave. We know straight away then something's gone badly wrong. We then see him taking all his SS archives and things and burning them. We then also see him kill the family dog. So we know straight from the start, exactly, bang, here we are, we know what's happened. It's the downfall of Hitler, the Americans are coming, he has to get away. And they leave as a family, and they go to a small cottage. And as the days pass by, the locals ostracise them more and more, because it becomes clear that the neighbours know what it is that the father and mother have been involved in. And it's clearly something that either they don't approve of, or is illegal. We learn later on that the father was actually involved in concentration camps, and that's the reason why the neighbours obviously don't really want them involved. So what happens basically is the father and mother are taken away, off to prison, and Laura is told to take her siblings and get them to Hamburg, to the grandmother. She's given a small bag full of money and family heirlooms and jewellery and stuff, which is intended to see them through until they can reach Hamburg and the grandmother. And sort of what unfolds is almost like a road story of these children battling their way through the Black Forest and various border patrols to try and find their way to Hamburg and redemption. And along the way, they get accompanied by a young Jewish boy. And he becomes very interesting because he's first introduced sort of this shadowy figure in the background who's rather creepily following them round. It becomes fairly obvious that he's got a bit of a thing for Laura. But at one point, the children are stopped by American border patrols, and asked for their papers, which they haven't got. But thankfully, their young Jewish friend comes along and he presents his passport and everything else to show that he has papers, and he claims that he is their brother. Their parents have died and they're going to try and find the grandmother. And sort of he then ultimately tags along, he gets them food, he sort of helps them along the way. And what develops beyond this is a really, really interesting portrait of Laura as this young girl. And it's the conflict she feels between the obvious attraction she has for this sensitive Jewish boy and the fact that she has been indoctrinated by her parents for so long that the Jews are the enemies and that they must be destroyed and wiped out and they should never be encouraged. She at one point tells him not to even touch her siblings because they're too precious for that, and he can't pollute them with his Jewish ways. And it's an interesting piece put together, because what you see is the idolatry, and bigotry and intolerance that have been indoctrinated into these children by the Third Reich, which obviously we know it went on. We've seen documentaries and things about the Hitler Youth and whatever else. But this is a really cunning way of doing it, in that Laura has no reason to dislike this boy. She clearly has an attraction to him. He's clearly... Without him, they wouldn't be there. They'd be in an American detention centre somewhere. And yet, despite all he's doing, he's bringing them food, he's looking after the children. And yet she despises and loathes him. And the question you have to ask yourself is, does she despise and loathe him because he's a Jew? Or does she despise and loathe him because she despises and loathes herself for being attracted to this Jew and letting him help them? And it's a real struggle within her, and you can see it's beautifully played. And this is the whole central problem for them, is that she's conflicted, and becomes even more so when they're in a town square and she sees pictures of the concentration camps and the German guards who did this, and she sees one of the officers, who looks an awful lot like her father, and it dawns on her what it is that her parents potentially have been doing during the war, and the unspeakable, unbearable cruelty of it all against the Jews. But put against that, you've got her entire lifetime of being taught that these Jews are the enemies, that they should be loathed and despised and outcast. And this is the whole point of the whole film, is that it's a constant conflict between what she believes now and what she's always believed, because the two things are now fundamentally incompatible. And the fact is that everything she's believed her entire life is now being brought into question, which she doesn't want to do. She doesn't want to face this. All she wants to do is get the children to her grandmother's house and get back to the life she used to lead. But the point is, where we are now, that life no longer exists. The most painful part in many ways is when she's told that Germany itself no longer exists. Germany is now into four quarters, and they're owned by the British, the French, the Americans and the Russians. And the fact is that there is no more Germany. Germany is gone. And she doesn't understand this. She said that Germany can't be gone. We're here, we're in Germany. This is our land. And yet they can't now move freely within their own world. And what sort of transpires is that they make it as far as the train to Hamburg. And onto the train come these American guards, checking everyone's papers. And the problem is that the young Jewish friend, he cannot find his papers anywhere. And you think you know exactly now where this film is going to go. Is that previously he saved them, they are now going to save him. And what you see is it's not that at all. What you see is Laura actually just lets him get arrested after all he's done for her and all the feelings she has for him. she just lets them take him away. And you sort of see the brutality that's been ingrained in her. That even after all she's seen and all he's done for her, she still can't get over her old prejudices. The fact that he is a Jew and therefore, why would she help him? And what sort of unfortunately happens after this is that one of her brothers admits that it was him who took away the passport and the papers to try and make sure that he couldn't leave them. But it's revealed that he's told the brother that he wasn't a Jew at all. They're papers that he stole. And suddenly, the whole thing beautifully crashes together, and you just see suddenly Laura realises the magnitude of now what she's done. This guy who she despised, who did nothing but help her and feed her siblings, and she hated him. And the one thing she had to cling to was the fact that he was a Jew, and it now looks like he might not even have been a Jew after all. And she's lost him, willingly, for a lie. And it brings everything beautifully to a head, because you can suddenly see the conflict. She gets them as far as the grandmother's house, and you can see that she's now just wrestling with her inner demons, and it's beautifully done because she's not quite sure anymore. Because previously she had in her life absolute certainty, absolute faith in the Führer, in the system, in her parents, in the wrongness of the Jewish people. Now, what she's left with is the question of, first of all, is her friend a Jew or not? Does it matter whether it was or not? We aren't sure. What also strikes up together is the fact that she can't anymore trust her father, because she's now seen the truth of what he potentially might have done. There's a beautifully touching scene in which she takes away not only the clipping that she has of this officer with the Jews, but also the one remaining picture of her father. And she puts them together and just buries them in a really, the thing is, it's a really shallow grave, which is a beautifully taken moment, because ultimately that's what her father potentially has been doing to all these Jews, burying them in shallow graves. And ultimately now, that's where he ends up, at the hands of his own daughter. And it's this symbolism that really does strike at the heart of the film and makes it such an absolute triumph of a film. The ultimate bit we have is that over the course of the film, at the start she was given jewels and money and that to try and get them across to Hamburg. She spends all of that. The only thing that she gets to her grandmother's house with is a rather hideous-looking china deer. That's all there is. And when she gets put in her grandmother's spare room, she puts the deer down on the dressing table with some more china deer. And when she comes down to dinner, her grandmother tells her to wait to have bread before you take your soup. And you can just see something beautifully just clicks in her, that she suddenly realises, why am I listening to this generation? This generation who has now done nothing but lie to me through this whole film. The only person who ever helped me was the person that I was told to loathe more than anybody else. And she goes upstairs and she takes the deer, the last thing of her parents. There is nothing else left of them. The last thing of her old life. And she stamps on it and smashes it to pieces. And this is it. The whole thing is that her entire old life has now gone. It's done with. All people have ever done to her. And she realises it now is lied to her. And this is what makes it so amazingly beautiful, is that kind of bit of symbolism. You're thinking, I'm not the kind of person that would ever normally applaud at a film, but when the final credits roll in this one, it was all I could do to keep in my seat and not to literally applaud that film. It is staggeringly good. The point is that you thought, when you went in, there was nothing more to say about this. The fact was the Holocaust has been done to death. There is nothing else you can possibly say. There are no more stories to tell. Boy, were we wrong. This film is just out of this world good. I mean, I'm looking at all the other reviews around of it, and they tend to hover around the 4.5 to 5 star rating. For me, it's a definite 5-star film, if not more than that. It is one of these films that you really, really, if you've got any interest in the human condition, if you have any interest in cinema as a form of art, to make you feel things, to make you look at symbolic things and think, each action potentially means something else. It is just stunningly good, and I really, really, really cannot recommend highly enough this film for anyone to go and see. As long as you don't mind your foreign cinema, which, why should you? It's fantastic. As long as you don't mind subtitles, again, why would you? They're great. Every single good film tends to have them, in my opinion. And I would say, come the end of the year now, this film, I mean, 2013 in and of itself is turning into a superb year for film. We have had some great films this year already. We've had Mea Maxima Culpa, we've had No, we've had The Brilliant Amour. This film just wipes the floor with all of them. It is so, so good. I really just cannot specify enough how much I love this film. I thought it was absolutely sublime. And if you have any chance to go and see it, grab that chance with both hands and really just be amazed at how old ground is not being retrodden here. It's being completely regrown. It's making you see a whole new story that you thought you'd never seen before, and it is utterly incredible. Please, just if you get a chance, go and watch it, and I'll see you next time. Ta-ra.